Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, with Rabbi Chaim Coffman live in Israel. This class has been such a joy. I think we're on part 10, or is it 11 of Mishnah 2, chapter 2, Mishnah 5? I think so. I'm not sure if it's 10 or 11, but I think maybe the rabbi's trying to teach me personally something, and I know I've always got much room to grow, so let's just tune right in, see how the rabbi's doing. Rabbi, how are you doing in Israel today, sir?
Doing very well. It's going to be part 11, and actually we're going to probably finish this Mishnah. I didn't finish it off last week, but hopefully we're going to finish it. And just interesting, it's been quite cold here. Got a little bit of rain, which we can still get around this time of year. Normally we don't get rain now, but it's been a little bit, as we would say in Boston, a little bit nippy. Right, a little bit nippy, needed a winter coat. It was, but next week's supposed to be back to summer. It should be nice and warm, so just in time for Israel Independence Day, everyone can make their barbecues. So the weather will cooperate, I'm sure, certainly for that. So we are again, chapter 2, Mishnah 5. This is the 11th part, and we're at the end. We're at the end where it says, when I am free, I will study. Right? And a person should not say that, because how do you know when you're going to be free? Right? We don't know. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to bring. Right? We certainly spoke about that. Right? And we mentioned the question of Rav Yisrael Zev Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, the Brisker Rav, right? Who asked the question, why does the Mishnah have to tell me? Right? Why does the Mishnah have to tell me this? Don't I have an obligation to learn anyway? Right? Shouldn't say, when you have time, you'll say, when you have time, then I'll learn. What are you talking about? You have to learn anyway. Right? You always have an obligation to learn. So you're not going to say, well, when I find time, because I already have the obligation. Right? So we explain that as well. And so we're gonna start. We also mentioned when a person wants to do the right thing and they want to go in the right direction. Right? What happens? The evil inclination comes along. Right? The evil inclination comes along and makes it difficult. What does the evil inclination do? The evil inclination does not come and tell you, I don't want you to do the mitzvah. What does the evil inclination do? Tries to push you off from doing the mitzvah. Right? So he says, you got time, do it later. And then we mentioned which made your hair stand up a little bit. Right? And that was that if a person wants to do the mitzvah, and for some reason they're under onus, they're not able to do it for whatever reason. So what happens? You get credit as if you did it, right? Even though you didn't do it, but you had all the intention. But if you did the mitzvah, you started the mitzvah, and then what happened? You didn't do it, right? So it's brought down that when a person does that you bury your wife and your children in your lifetime. Right? In other words, you started something and you didn't finish it. Now, why is the punishment that much more severe? The punishment is that much more severe for one very simple reason. You said, I want to do the mitzvah. I'm in the process of doing the mitzvah. Since I'm in the process of doing the mitzvah, what happened? What happened is that I wanted to do the mitzvah, but I didn't do it. Right? I didn't finish it. Since I didn't finish it, it's as if to say, well, you know what? God, it was a nice try. It's not that important to me. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but what are you showing? The fact you're in the middle of doing it, why didn't you finish? If you were under onus, something happened, and if something happened, okay, maybe God's going to cut me some slack, because I was under onus. It wasn't in my control. All right, something happened. But what if it's in my control? What if it's in my control? If it's in my control, then why didn't I do it? Why didn't I finish? Let's say better. Why didn't I finish it? Right? In other words, you're going to have some good explanation why you didn't do it. Because essentially what you're saying is, God, I don't really care. It was important enough for me to start it. Right? It was extremely important for me to start it. But the fact that I started it means that maybe it's not that important for me to finish. I got distracted, something else happened, whatever it is. And that's certainly not good, right? That's why the punishment is so severe. And that's why we mentioned as well, if a person is learning with somebody else or themselves, they look out the window and they see a beautiful tree, a beautiful bird, and they say, wow, what a beautiful thing, etc., which we're going to see one day, probably in the next 40 years, we'll get there, right? We'll see that where it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, the person does that while they're learning, they're liable for a death penalty. Now the question is going to be, but I don't understand. You're praising creation. You have an opportunity to see Saturn, right? Saturn, you don't always have an opportunity to see, right? It comes down, you get a nice telescope, whatever, you're able to see it, beautiful. Why can't I say those beautiful rings, right? Not ring around the collar, those beautiful rings of Saturn. Why can't I say that? I can't say it because I should have been learning. You're praising God's creation. You're right, God's telling you, but I wanted you to focus on learning. You can praise my creation at another time. I'm not interested in you praising my creation right now. It's a distraction. But isn't it a mitzvah to me to praise your creation? So you'll say there's a time for everything, right? There's a time to learn. There's a time to pray. There's a time to say, well, God's creation is unbelievable, but not when I'm learning. That is a distraction. We also learn in Pirkei Avos, as it says in chapter 6, Mishnah 2. I have no idea when we're going to get there, but as a prelude, it says every single day a heavenly voice calls out from Mount Horeb and announces and says, woe to the ones that don't learn Torah. Right? That's what it says. Now, this is an obvious wonder. Why? Because the last time I heard, unless the person, is a little bit schizophrenic, we don't hear heavenly voices. Right? I do have someone, has contacted me, pretty convinced because of a number of coincidences that this person is actually the Messiah. And he keeps telling me I'm normal, I do everything normal. I'm not one of these whack jobs, but I believe, beyond the shadow of a doubt that I am the Messiah. So I said, well, you haven't brought the exiles into Jerusalem. You haven't, built the temple. There are certain things, that you have to do. I said, but what is your proof? What exactly is your proof? So he brought me a whole bunch of coincidences, right? A bunch of very interesting coincidences. Okay. Coincidences do not prove anything, right? Dreams don't prove anything unless you know for sure God is coming to you or it's a definite prophecy. Because all the prophets knew they were having prophecy. Unlike Moshe Rabbeinu, they were in a trance. They had no control of their body, right? They were in some sort of trance. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to speak to God face to face, but they understood, right? Prophets understood they were having prophecy. And not only that, they had to get the prophecy right. If they don't get the prophecy right, they're liable for the death penalty. So it's complicated to be a prophet. Nonetheless, they had to work hard at it, spent years, trying to get to that level, and all that. I don't think this guy's close. I definitely don't think he's close, right? But in general, even if a person has a lot of coincidences, etc., it doesn't really matter because today there's no such thing as prophecy. The only thing the Talmud says who has prophecy today, either little children or imbeciles or people, let's say, that are mentally challenged, right? You're going to tell me someone like that has prophecy? No such thing. Even the greatest rabbis of this generation. So prophecy they don't have. What do they have? What do they have? They have the lowest form of prophecy. The lowest form of prophecy is what we call Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. So divine inspiration means, you got information from above that you never should have had. So I was on this long YouTube video last week, and so this person had asked, about, they said, well, we say Christianity is idolatry and this and that. They said, well, isn't there a thing that you believe in the Holy Spirit? So I said, well, that sounds like a Christian thing. We don't believe in the Holy Spirit. Oh, so they brought me a Wikipedia article Now, what's the Holy Spirit in Judaism? It's called, they take it literally, Ruach HaKodesh. What does Ruach HaKodesh mean? It means divine inspiration. Ruach means spirit. Kodesh means holy.
Right.
Right? So the Holy Spirit, Wikipedia, I'm not looking at the article, but refers to this divine force. Yeah, it's called divine inspiration. It's not to be mixed up with this spirit of the Trinity of non-Jews, right? We're not gonna mix that up. We're not gonna mix that up, right? Nope. But the way it was said, sort of confused me because we don't believe in that, right? That's part of the Trinity. But if you say it's Ruach HaKodesh, it's divine inspiration, there are great people today that can have it, right? There are great rabbis today that certainly can have it. So even if that is true, they're getting information they shouldn't have. So I've heard by some great rabbis, there are different stories by people where they came up with certain things that according to nature they never should have known. Right? They absolutely never should have known. Now, if they shouldn't have known it, where'd they get the information from? So the only other explanation is that they got it from above. Right? A little birdie or something whispered in their ear, gave them information. We know from the Beis Yosef, the Rav Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. We know he brought down, others say the same thing, that he learned together with an angel. Right? He had learning together as a book about all the things that he learned with this angel. So, okay, that's not divine inspiration. That's actually learning with an angel. The Vilna Gaon, an angel came to him, wanted to help him learn something that he was having difficulty with. And the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, wasn't interested. Right? He says, I want to figure it out on my own. I don't want any help. I don't want any, external or internal help, whatever you want to call it. Right? So this definitely does exist. Again, it's going to be by certain great individuals. Most people today will not have this, won't even be close. Right? Won't be close in any way, any way, shape, or form. So what does the Mishnah there say? The Mishnah there says, woe to the ones that don't learn Torah, right? In other words, this heavenly voice comes out. So the first question is, nobody hears it, right? Who's the one that hears this heavenly voice? Comes along the Sefer Haredim, written a few hundred years ago, and he explains the heavenly voice. What does it do? It wants to arouse in us to be close to God, right? That was one of the questions I got. Also, one of these lengthy discussions, which I'll just throw out because, it's an interesting thing, right? The question, one of the questions was, what's the purpose of the Jewish people, right? So what did they come up with? What did they come up with? Let me just find the exact. Isn't the idea of teaching Noahide law? See, people have an issue when teaching Noahide. I have an obligation to reach out to you, right? In other words, the Jewish people have an obligation to reach out to non-Jews, and the answer is that's not true. First of all, there's no source to show that. Second of all, if a non-Jew, they come out of idolatry, they want to know what the truth is. They'll find the truth because God's going to help them. God is going to help them get to the truth. If they don't want the truth, okay, God is not going to stop them, right? But what was the quote over here that really bugged me, right? I mean, there are a lot of quotes over here that really bugged me, but this one, if I were to rank them, this one is really up there, and that isn't the idea of teaching Noahide laws to discourage and denounce idolatry and blasphemy among Gentiles as part of our Tikkun Olam. Now that term, Tikkun Olam, has been thrown around like a rag doll. Why do I say like a rag doll? The Reform movement uses it all the time because they want to say, not that we, the Jewish people, have an obligation. And what does it really mean? Fixing up the world. Tikkun Olam means, first of all, we have to do what we need to do. The Jewish people. Now, as this person claimed as well, we're not doing our job that well. We see, look what has happened to the Jewish people throughout the millennium. There have been famines, there have been death, tremendous amount of death, etc. Jewish people have totally assimilated. right? A lot of them have assimilated, etc. So really, our own tikkun really is fixing ourselves up, drawing close to God, right? But the acts of loving kindness that we do, what is that going to do? It's going to bring the world to its completion, right? Because if we do what we're supposed to do, then the non-Jews are going to say, thank God his Rebbe taught him Torah. Thank God his father taught him Torah. They're going to want to know what it means to be a non-Jew. They're not going to want to convert necessarily, right? They're going to want to be the best non-Jews that they can be. Now, so if my obligation is really, to do great acts in the world, and to help others, who are we helping first, right? Let's keep in mind. I don't want to get, too bogged down because I spoke about a lot about this last week. But the point is, our obligation to Jews, right? As Jews, there's an obligation to help other Jews first, right? I'm not going to help, if the CFL is in trouble and I have a ton of money, I'm not going to help bail them out. I'm going to give that money, I'm going to give that money to help orphans, widows, yeshivas, girls' schools, because there's a Talmudic dictum. The Talmudic dictum is all Jews are interrelated. All Jews are interspersed. So when a Jew does the wrong thing in Israel, in France, in Canada, whatever, even if they're secular, all Jews get blamed, right? Why do all Jews get blamed? We all get blamed because we're all intertwined. This doesn't exist by any other nation, right? Now, imagine an Italian in Brooklyn does something wrong. People are going to walking down the streets, burning the flags of Italy. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to say, we're going to boycott all the Italian restaurants. No more cannoli. It's over. That doesn't exist, right? If some Chinese person did something, a Korean did something. Now, people will say there's a lot of, Asian backlash, right now in the States. People will say there's tremendous amount of racism and still exists against blacks, etc., which that may be true. Right, that very well may be true, but I'm going to go on the line because we are recording, right, and we're not afraid to be a little bit controversial here, right? That's why I do controversial issues, right? We're not going to be afraid over here. What are we going to say? We're going to say the Jewish people have been condemned, burned, blasphemed against, heretical things against, more than any other nation combined. Now, no offense to the blacks. Over the last 400 or 500 years, they've had it hard. No question about it, right? Asians having it hard now, right? So I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say there's not discrimination against any other nations. No. There's plenty of discrimination that exists. But if you look at Jewish history, first of all, the miracle of the Jews that exist, we should never be here, right? That's what Samuel Lang Owens Clement, right? Known other as Mark Twain. Right, when he said he came to Israel, the place was flat like a pancake. There's nobody there, right? Exactly what the Torah says. But the Jews have been condemned. They've been burned. There have been holocausts. It is interesting that exponentially the most winners of Nobel prizes happen to be Jews, right? Which boggles the mind. Percentage. Since we are 1/1000th or less of the world's population, how could 30-40%, of Nobel prizes, again,
I think it's higher literature,
science, math, go to Jews? That doesn't make any sense logically, right? Not only that, I'll just throw another statistic out there because I like statistics, and it says that Jews give more money to charity exponentially more than anybody else, more than any other ethnic group, right? And not because we're the richest. We're not the richest. There are rich Jews. There are plenty of Jews that have money. That is true. But, the secular Jews, UJA, UJC, the United Jewish Appeal, the United Jewish Community, I think it's called, they raise more than $500 million a year to bad charities. I'm not saying even good charities, but they raise close to $500 million a year. Right? Now, if it wouldn't be in their psyche to give money to charity, even the bad charity, why would they do it? Right, when we're talking about different groups who give money to charity, we top the charts, right? We definitely top the charts here, right? But let's just get back to this one thing, that I want to go on here, right? And that is okay. We have to do acts of loving kindness, right? We have to bring the world back. Tikkun Olam really means bringing the world. I should have really brought this out at the forefront. It means bringing the world back to where it was before Adam and Eve had ate from the tree. That's really what it stands for. But the Reform movement took it in a whole different way, right? Took it in a whole different way. But this misquote, and one of the things that bugs me is most people will realize, over time, is I don't like people that lie. I don't like people that misrepresent. And I don't like people that talk about things that they don't have a stinking clue what they're talking about, right? So now you take this statement. Isn't that part of my Tikkun Olam? First of all, Google what Tikkun Olam really is. Second of all, it has a totally different definition. Third of all, and this was one of my main arguments, there are 13.5 million Jews that don't know the Aleph Beis, that don't know anything about Judaism. Now, if a person works and they only have a certain amount of time to learn, does that mean if I have 2 hours to learn, let's say, I have 2 hours to learn, should I spend an hour and a half reaching out to Noahites, reaching out to non-Jews? Don't I have an obligation to learn myself, learn what the laws are, be the best Jew I can be? Doesn't mean I don't have to help if I can, right? Because we ended this after 3.5 hours. They say, well, after all this, so what are you going to do? I said, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I work with Noahites also. I'm not just sitting learning on my own. I have to have a certain amount of time to prepare and to learn. Right. Otherwise, if I don't prepare this stuff, Dan's going to have my head. He's going to say, Rabbi, we can't do this anymore. Your ratings are plummeting. No one's going to listen, right? It's a waste of time. Poor Dan, we have to get him up in the ratings over here, right? We got to get him inside, this Noahide group over here, the Noahide World Center. Got to get him in. Okay, I digress. I digress. But the point is, you want to ask questions? You can ask as many questions as you want. But do not talk like you're authoritative if you don't really know what you're talking about, right?
Agreed.
So how can somebody say in any way, shape, or form, I should be learning, if I only have 2 hours to learn, most of that time should be with non-Jews. There's a spiritual holocaust going on. There are 13.5 million Jews don't know anything. Is it my obligation to my own people? Oh, you're racist. No, I'm not racist. Non-Jews look out for their own. They're not looking out for me. Right? The non-Jews have never looked out for the Jewish people. Ever. Right? One thing, I'll just throw out the Holocaust, because last week was Holocaust Remembrance Day. Right? So I'll throw out what's one thing we learn about the Holocaust. Right? One thing. So people ask the question, where was God during the Holocaust? Right? How could God kill 6 million Jews? Right? So what's the answer? The answer is it takes a lot of people to kill 6 million Jews. Right? What do we have? You have the Germans. You have the Poles. You have the Czechoslovakians. You have the Russians. You have, the list goes on. You have the Hungarians. You have all these people. So the question isn't where was, why did God do this? Where was man? Right? That's really the question. Where was man? So when we look at, the Holocaust, in general, as people are commemorating it, last week, there's one thing we learned. And the one thing we learned is never, ever, ever, this is for the Jewish people, never, ever, ever rely on men. Right? In other words, even if you have a religious Orthodox Jew, part of the government, right, in any country, or, is in the Senate or whatever it is, right? We have to rely on one thing. The only thing we have to rely on is Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. That's it.
Amen.
Right? There are other things we can learn from the Holocaust. This is a major thing. So therefore, if we have an obligation to bring as many Jews back to Judaism, get them to understand the importance of their heritage, how in the world can you make the claim and say, that's part of my Tikkun Olam? That's part of fixing up the world. Now, I can understand if we had more non-Jews that were Noahites or thought like Noahites, there would be less anti-Semitism. That is true. Is it going to get rid of anti-Semitism? No. And the reason is Esav hates Yaakov. Since Esav hates Yaakov from the beginning of time, that will never end until the Messiah comes. So let's say we would eradicate 80%. Okay, 80% is good, right? There'll be less anti-Semitism. There's also another problem, right? There's also another issue, right? What's the issue? And that is that anti-Semitism is going to exist, probably get worse right before the Messiah comes. And that's what we see right now, right? It's going haywire. It's going absolutely haywire, right? And anti-Semitism is not logical, right? In other words, if you give the reason why there's anti-Semitism, right? In other words, the Jews are rich. You go to a country, Jews are poor, and there's still anti-Semitism.
The stories out there, yeah.
That's not the reason. You
Conspiracy
say the Jews,
theories.
The Jews are, control Hollywood. So what about another country where they don't control that industry? So every reason that you'll say in another place, if that reason doesn't exist, that means that's not the issue, right? That means anti-Semitism cannot be the issue, So anti-Semitism exists because it exists. Even someone wanted to point out, even if the Jews do the right thing, even if we do the right thing, what's going to happen? There's still going to be anti-Semitism, right? Because I brought very clear, when the Jews got the Torah, Mount Sinai, all the non-Jews didn't want it, went to all the nations. All the nations rejected the Torah. So God came to the Jewish people, say, you want the Torah? They said, sure. You want to know what's written in it? We don't care. We're not interested. So one explanation the Talmud says is, what does the word Sinai mean? Comes from the word Shin, Nun, Aleph, or Shin, Nun, Yud, or Samech, Nun, Yud, whatever it is. It means hatred.
Wow.
So you get the mountain of hatred. What do you mean the mountain of hatred? God gave the Jewish people the Torah. If he gave the Jewish people the Torah and the non-Jews didn't want it, so why are they complaining? You're going to say they're jealous. Why are they jealous? Oh, we could have had the Torah. Oh, this. Today it's not about jealousy. They hate Jews for it could be jealousy. We have power. We now have, a lot more power. We have money, other things. So yeah, it could be jealousy, in a certain way. But I'm asking a very specific question. The very specific question is, if the Jews got the Torah and the non-Jews didn't want to have any part of it, right? Many moons ago, they didn't want any part of it. And now they say, oh, it's not fair. It's not right. You're the chosen people. You think you're better. You think this. So what are they arguing about? What in the world are they arguing about? But don't make the mistake. Don't make the mistake and think, oh, we have no obligation, to non-Jews. Because someone made the claim and say, oh, see, non-Jews are going to come. They want to be Noahites. The rabbis aren't going to deal with them. They're going to push them off. They're going to make them second-class citizens. They're going to hate Judaism. Now, if someone's a really true Noahide, and someone is really searching for truth, I think they're going to understand, right? Most rabbis are not, some people claim they're afraid. What are they afraid of? What are we afraid of, right? Does every rabbi in a synagogue have the knowledge to deal with non-Jews? No. Are there a myriad number of Jews, religious, less religious, whatever, in their synagogues they have to deal with? Yes. Who are they going to deal with first? Their own. Now, what they should do, if they don't know what to do with them, find them someone who can deal with them. I'm not saying push it aside, but non-Jews have to be dealt with also, right? But is that my total obligation? Is that my total obligation to work with non-Jews and everything else? I don't have to worry about Jews.
Of course
or Judaism.
Not,
that's foolish.
We're thankful you do.
That's foolish. But at the same time, someone will say, these non-Jews come, then they're going to hate Jews if you push them away. They may hate Jews anyway. That's not an excuse. That totally is not an excuse, right? And we're not going to make an excuse of anti-Semitism either. We're our own worst enemy, right? But that's never going to go away. So someone will say, well, if we did the right thing, if we do the right thing, anti-Semitism is still there, right? But this is a big misnomer. You can't speak out of two sides of your mouth. And how is an Orthodox Jew going to be educated if he's spending his whole time working with non-Jews? He's got an obligation to learn on his own, right? You're going to say, well, what if someone already knows everything and learned a lot? Okay, right? But you have to have a balance, right? You absolutely have to have a balance. If you're just giving over, but you're not learning, that means you're stunting your growth, right? Because you always have to be learning. You always have to be fresh over here, right? So anyway, I don't want to, go too much into that, but, the idea is that non-Jews have to know what they have to do, 100%. Right, they're obligated to know that, and they need, proper Jews to be able to educate them, and they can't, this is the reason. Sure. This is the reason why they can't learn on their own. So So I said there's so many things a non-Jew doesn't know. One example, the sorcery applied to non-Jews. Does taking a nectarine, taking a peach and a plum, and putting them together make a nectarine. Or taking a donkey and a horse, making a mule. A mule is a very strong animal. Only one problem, sterile. Can't reproduce. So seemingly we would say, maybe a non-Jew is obligated in these things because you're not allowed to play with creation. Right? The Talmud does not answer the question. It's an open-ended question. Right? It's a question for the rabbis later generations to say whether they're liable, they're not liable, but the Talmud does not give an answer. Does not give a clear-cut answer. So, so a person says, well, it's only the 7 Noahide laws, and a lot of Muslims keep some of these or whatever, so you can be like the Muslims, this and that. So I said, what about sorcery? Give me an Islamic scholar. Tell me about sorcery. Does that apply? Does making a nectarine, does that apply? So the person says respectfully, Rabbi, it's not part of the 7 Noahide laws. I said, yeah, because you only know 7. They're like 60 or 70, according to some rabbinical authorities, right? So if that's the case, you only know 7, right? That means you didn't find a website out there to tell you there were more than 7. That's what it means. It means you're uneducated in the Noahide laws.
Oh, they're veins of gold for sure.
In the Noahide laws, don't say something you want to ask a question, right? But you want to say, well, it's only these 7, right? And according to Islamic law, it fits. No, it doesn't, because there are subcategories, right? There are subcategories of don't kill. Let's say there are 20 subcategories of don't kill. Self-defense, euthanasia, other things, whatever it is, and let's say certain things don't apply according to Islam. But that's even a moot point because we don't hold of Islam anyway. So it doesn't matter what they say. So what are we going to do? Take all the Noahides who we're going to throw away and we're going to push away? We're going to send them to the Muslims. No, I don't think so. Right? That is hideous. Right? That makes no sense. Someone will say no because they have Islamophobia. Yeah, maybe they do, but if it's a false religion, it doesn't matter. Right? So over here, we have to be able to hear the voice. Right? The Sefer Haredim comes along and says, you listen to the words of rebuke. If you want to hear what the Torah says, even if you don't like it, so to speak, and you're going to hear rebuke, you hear it. You merit its voice. Now, again, most people are not going to merit their voice today, right? This voice today, because we're not holding where we should be. Nonetheless, we have that potential, right? That's how the Sefer Haredim over here explains. That even though we don't hear the voice, we want to be close to God. We want to work towards that, even if we don't hear the voice. But the point is, we have to internalize the message. And if we don't internalize the message, we'll make mistakes, right? We'll make we'll have jealousy. We'll have other bad things that can destroy a person, like Korach, right? What happened to Korach? He got destroyed. Jealousy killed him, right? We'll get there in the next 50 years, right? That says jealousy, honor, take a person out of this world, right? That is in Pirkei Avos. And we learned it out from Korach, right? But Korach didn't get the message. He did not internalize the message. Now, we can also explain this. Comes along Job, chapter 7, verse 18. And it says over there that you inspect him every morning and you observe him every moment. Right? What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that the seconds or moments of purity, person has an epiphany. Person does a mitzvah. Right? Whatever it is, and they feel this holiness, because that's what mitzvahs do. They draw us close to God, whether we understand it or not. A person can feel he's on another planet, may not know necessarily what he's doing. He takes a lulav on Sukkot, and he's shaking this lulav, and he's shaking it up, and shaking it down, shaking it all around. He understands basically what he's doing, right? He understands, simple explanation what he's doing. Okay, but what does that do? So the Torah says even if we don't really understand it, doesn't mean we don't have to, we don't have to work at it. What it means is that mitzvah itself has a positive effect on the soul. Has nothing to do with Kabbalah, right? Nothing with Kabbalistic intention. I did the mitzvah. The purpose of the mitzvah is to draw me close. The purpose of anything, that was the question, another question I got. It's okay, if the Jewish people are chosen, what's their obligation? Our obligation is to be close to God as much as possible. We have to be a light into nations. What's the right way to be a light into nations? We do whatever God says, right? We keep kosher. We don't push in line We don't drive crazy on the road, right? We do things that God wants us to do. When we do that, non-Jews are going to want to say, wow, this is unbelievable. Look how Jews act. Problem is, some schnook does something wrong, makes everybody look bad, right? They'll say, oh, look, you guys are spreading the virus. Well, do you understand how demographics work? 7, 8 kids in a house, right? You have blocks of houses, apartment buildings. So one person gets it, everybody gets it, right? People say, oh, I can't send them to synagogue, can't send them here, right? They're spreading it. Only 10%, at least here in Israel, 10% of the cases, of COVID were people spreading it in synagogues. What was the highest amount were really in schools, right? But what was higher than that? Much higher than that in the house. People got it in the house. Why'd they get it in the house? Again, very simple. They got it in the house for the very reason that there are just more people around, right? There are more people around, and it's much easier. It's much easier to get. It's not about wearing masks, not wearing masks, and all that. It's kind of like someone gets a cold or the flu, right? One person gets it. I'm not saying everybody's going to get
doorknobs,
but it's the law of averages. One person gets it. A lot of people are going to get it within your household. Oh, you're a parasite. You're this. You're doing these things. No, the fact is we have more kids. That's true. That is definitely true. We definitely have more kids. We are more social, right? Go to synagogue, go to weddings, go to bar mitzvahs, do all these different things. That's true. But that's not where the majority of things were coming from, right? It was coming from the house. Nobody said anything about the riots last summer. No masks, no social distancing. We call them parasites. When you call them all kinds of names, say, oh, look, there's going to be a spike. We have to stop this. Oh, we're not going to stop it. That's First Right Amendment. They have these poor blacks, 400 years, they've been so oppressed. They have a right to destroy someone's business. They have right to steal all these Nike shoes, sneakers and all that, So we're going to make it even over here. According to Noahide laws, you just killed them for stealing. You killed them for causing damage. You don't care why things, what happened to people. We care what they do. Someone steals money and they say, listen, you have to understand, we're poverty stricken and this person's sick and they can't work. And yeah, that's all true. That may all very well be true. And it's tragic, right? 100% it's tragic. But you cannot tell me because of that, you still have the right to steal. Right? We don't believe in Robin Hood over here, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Right? That is not a Jewish concept.
Nope.
Right? Absolutely not a Jewish concept. Now, again, it's a terrible situation, right? But we're not going to say 2 wrongs make a right over here. Right? You got to figure out a different type of situation. But, how can we say down the line, you say, well, this happened to these people for so long, and they're angry. I get it. Who gives you the right to destroy someone's building? Who gives you the right to steal? Who gives you the right to do any of these things? So as a Bible thumper, which we are, right, we would say, you know what, if you do that, I'll kill you. We have an obligation to kill you because you're transgressing the Noahide laws, right? So someone will say, but don't you have to warn them? No. Why not? Because the Noahide laws we mentioned many times are obvious, right? Isn't it true you're not allowed to steal, right? If you'd ask anybody, from the age of 7, you ask them the following question, yes or no. We're not answering buts. We're not answering, you have to look at it this way. No. Are you allowed to steal? Yes or no? So everybody has to say, no, you're not allowed to steal, right? Even the secular world, they'll say you're not allowed to steal. Then some people will make a caveat and they'll say, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about our situation over here? Person's starving, look at their situation, look at what they've been through. And again, for us, we don't really care what is in the mind. We care what a person does. Because 99% of what is in our mind, words and thoughts in our mind, don't matter. Except maybe when it comes to immorality or idolatry, which doesn't apply to a non-Jew, right? In many ways. It's all about action. So even if a person wrote a 50-page essay, why they had to do this, why it's permissible, and all that. That doesn't matter, right? It doesn't mean we don't have to show empathy, right? That's not the point. The point is what is done, right? So therefore, we need to do what we need to do. And a person can't say, oh, I didn't know, right? To get upstairs after 120 years, and God says you're guilty for this, for that, for the other thing. But they say, but don't you understand the situation? Don't you understand what was going on? God says, of course I understand what was going on, but that's not the way. That's not the way. This is not something obscure. This is not something that, oh, I never would have thought of. Don't murder. Set up law courts. Other things that are obvious according to the Torah. How are you ever going to make that claim? Now you might say, making a nectarine, right, from a peach and a plum. Maybe that's not as explicit, right? Or taking a donkey and a horse and making a mule. But isn't there, who says I'm allowed to play with creation? Right? Now, if, someone will say, well, maybe non-Jews wouldn't figure that out. I don't know. I don't know. That might be obvious. That might be obvious. Maybe we'll say if it's a God-driven world, which most people probably don't think about, but if it's a God-driven world, meaning he's in charge, does not mean I have the right to do whatever I want. It doesn't mean God's going to stop you, per se, but a person has to think, am I allowed to do this in God's world? So you say, people do it, so it's not a problem. That's not the question. The question is it something that God wants me to do? Right? And what's the answer? Who says I'm allowed to play with creation? We're not doing it to find cures for diseases, right? That we're allowed to use animals, right, to find cures for diseases. That's okay, right? But over here, what am I doing? I want to make a mule. I want to make a very strong animal. Okay, but who says I'm allowed to play with creation, right? Someone who's wise, what are they going to do? They're going to be fastidious to learn Torah, keep mitzvahs. Why are they going to do it constantly? Not only are they obligated to do that, would be pretty obvious, but they're going to do it because when they're learning and they're fastidious, they are going to push away the evil inclination. In other words, they're too busy learning. They're too busy into what they're doing. Since they're so busy doing that, the evil inclination doesn't, it's going to be much harder for the evil inclination to intervene, right, over here. Because once the evil inclination intervenes a little bit, what can it do? It can weaken the resolve. That is what it wants to do. Remember, we said before, the evil inclination can come along and make you push off what you want to do. It's not telling you don't do it. It's giving you excuses to push it off. Oh, I really want to do it now, but I'm hungry, right? So I want to eat something. If I eat something, then I'll be able to think clear, right? If I do this one day, I need to exercise. I need to make the body strong. So if I exercise, that's going to give me the endorphins, right? I don't even need caffeine, right? I'm going to exercise 20 minutes, half an hour, get these endorphins going, and everything's great. And then I'll learn, right? But that also makes you more tired, right? On a different level. So this is why interesting. This is why someone shouldn't make known or announce they're going to do X mitzvah, right? A person should not say, I'm going to do this mitzvah, or I plan to do this mitzvah. Why? Because then the evil inclination says, oh, you want to do this mitzvah? Well, guess what? I'm going to have a little fun over here, right? If you don't say it, let's say the evil inclination knows your thoughts anyway, right? Let's say he knows what you're going to do, or potentially, right? If that is the case, it doesn't matter. The point over here is that if you announce it, then the evil inclination now for sure knows what you are going to do. So if the evil inclination now knows, what's he going to do? He's going to make it that much more difficult for you to do it. He's going to fight against you, right? So therefore, if a person is going to do a mitzvah, don't announce it, right? Because you're giving ample ammunition for the evil inclination, to fight against it. Now, a person would say the only reason I'm announcing it is because I want to psych myself up, right? The Talmud says that if a person makes a vow, right? They make a vow and say, I'm going to learn Torah, Or they make a vow and say they're gonna let's say better. They're going to put on tefillin, right? They're gonna wear phylactery, right? A Jew says, I'm gonna wear phylacteries tomorrow. Well, why is that a vow? Why is that a valid vow? Because he has an obligation anyway, right? Tomorrow's a normal day. He has to put on tefillin. If he has to put on tefillin, what's he doing? He's got an obligation anyway. So the Gemara answers, he's being fastidious, right? He's psyching himself up to do the mitzvah, right? He's getting himself all psyched up. So over here, that's what he's doing. He's not making a vow, but he's saying he's going to do X, Y, or Z, and he's excited to do it, right? Or maybe even if he's not excited, he says, I'm going to do X, whatever the mitzvah is, right? When a person does that, you open your mouth to the evil inclination. The evil inclination says, oh, really? You want to do X mitzvah? I'm going to make it a little bit difficult. I'm going to make it cold. I'm going to make it snowy. I'm going to make it, you got 20 other things to do, and I'm going to push it off, right? I'm going to make it that much more difficult. So they're going to say, well, it's not fair. It's not fair. I'm trying to do the right thing. I absolutely want to do the right thing, right? So why should the evil inclination come and make my life difficult? Why doesn't God enable me to do it? So again, everything we do is a test, right? So the evil inclination, that's his job.
Everything
that we do, right? It's going to be a test. Either we're doing the right thing or we're doing the wrong thing, right? There's nothing in between, right? I heard somebody tell me many years ago, I'm good spiritually. I'm happy where I am.
Contentment.
Being
There's nothing
happy
wrong
where
with
I
contentment,
am.
is there?
Say again?
Contentment.
Contentment is akin to spiritual death. The reason is because we always have room to grow.
Of course.
A person could never say, if you look.
Well, we say shalom, peace. I mean,
I
there not a degree?
but if a person looks at their lives, right? I guarantee before you got involved with the Noahide World Center, and when you started a little bit getting involved, and understanding what Noahide is and all that, every single day you're not the same person.
No.
There's no possible way unless your heart is hard as a rock, and you're not taking the message, you're not getting the message properly, right? But if a person, even the beginning of their journey, right, and then they see years later, they should be levels and levels ahead of where they were, the way they think, the way they understand things. But you know what? What that does, that makes you more obligated. Not only does it make you more obligated,
it gets
the
heavy.
evil inclination hits you in a much different way.
Oh, yes.
A much different way. Certain things that we did years ago, we still may do to a certain extent today, but it's now if a person did it, they feel bad. They feel guilty. I just spent 2.5 hours watching this crummy game. My team didn't even win, right? And now, so not only didn't they win, I would say maybe there's a benefit, right? Your team won. Look, Red Sox won 4 in a row. Woo, no one still thinks they're going to do anything. Could very well be, right? But a person feels like pretty good. They went 0 for 3. They won 4 in a row. Who knows what's going to be? You feel better. But the question is, why do you even care? So way back when, you'd read every score, you'd see what the pitchers are doing, you'd be much more into it.
6 times a
So
day.
even if today you're into it and you really shouldn't be, and all that because you're holding a different level, right? You're not beating your heart on Yom Kippur and saying, oh, I can't believe this. It's the same thing as I did 20 years ago. It's not the same. It's not the same because the person's not the same. So every year we beat our hearts and we say, I did this, I did that, but it's not for the same things. Sometimes they will be, but most times they're for other things. That means we're growing. That means we're growing spiritually. But the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, and he says in the way of God, we're put in this world to toil, right? Essentially, what is he saying? You're put in this world to struggle, right? And you can't have a portion of the world to come without being in this world. So you have to reach a certain level, certain minimal level to have that portion of the world to come. But you're not going to do it. You're not going to get there if you don't have any tests. Yeah. Right? If you didn't have any tests, A person can say, well, God knows my thoughts anyway. He knows I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. So give me credit. Let me go sit in my, my lounge chair. Let me sip pina coladas. Give me credit. Giving credit doesn't work. Why not? Because you didn't do it. You didn't do the action. The Ramban, Nachmanides asked the question by Abraham, by the last test. He asked the question, what happened over here? Abraham is 9 for 9. So why not give him credit? He already had a legacy. He absolutely had a legacy. If he had a legacy, give him credit as if he sacrificed his son. Right? So what's the answer? The answer is God can't do that. Why can't God do that? Because he didn't do it. He didn't do the action. Right? Now, can't we say that we know he would have done it anyway? That's true. But we say also unreached potential is unreached potential, which means that if I didn't do it or a person didn't do it, they don't get credit over here, right? So the question will be, okay, let's say Abraham didn't do it. Isn't Abraham great? Isn't he great over here? Certainly. Does he have a legacy? Absolutely has a legacy. But you know what? His legacy wouldn't have been the same had he not gone through the last test. Doesn't mean he didn't have a legacy.
Right.
Instead, he went from 8.9 to 9.9. But if he wouldn't have gone to 9.9, it would have stayed at 8.9. Right? So everything we do is either we're doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing. Doesn't mean every single second is a test per se. Tests come whenever they come. Right? But in general, the tests don't stop. Right? A person goes to sleep, for instance, and he had trouble sleeping. Whatever reason, he had trouble sleeping. So does he have to get up early? If he's a Jew, doesn't he have an obligation? He still has to get up early and he still has to pray. He's not interested in eating matzah on Passover. God says, shut up and eat the matzah, right? That's what you got to do. No, I got a disposition. No, I have this. We're tested all the time. Sometimes we do it to ourselves. Other times based on our actions. Other times based on what God wants to reach from us, right? We have certain, let's say, dormant character traits that God wants to come out. How is he going to bring it out? He'll do it in many different ways, right? In ways you never thought.
Character traits.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you a personal example. So I had money at one time, right? A nice sum of money, and overnight it was taken. Now,
I read your book.
When you're in the middle of doing things, and you have no way to make money, and you have no way to pay bills, that's kind of difficult. Because all of a sudden you're here, and then you get thrown onto your knees, and then there are all kinds of other repercussions. Now, going through that, having ups and downs, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but still, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, right? Sometimes you're in the middle, right? It depends. It depends where you're holding. Depends on a lot of different things. Now, I would say like this: if I could speak to people about loss and about what it means, to be on your knees and all that, if I didn't go through it, could I take people through it and help them? Probably. From other knowledge I have, I probably could do that. But it's not the same. It's not the same. I could have empathy, but it's not the same as if you didn't go through it yourself. So now, when someone asks the question and they say, listen, I got credit card debt, right? Who doesn't have credit card debt? Most people have credit card debt. Or if I was in Boston, I'd say credit card debt, right? So what happens? There's what we call a statute of limitations. Statute of limitations means you don't pay. So what do the credit cards do? They send you to a collection agency and they bug the absolute heck out of you to get any money, right? So now you can play Monty Hall, right? Let's make a deal. You know what I'm talking about. You can play Monty Hall and they say, okay, listen, you owe $8,000. You say, I don't have $8,000. I'll give you 2.5. They'll say, we want 4. I said, I'll give you 2.5. That's what I have. That's all I have. I'll give you 2.5 now. We'll forget the whole thing. So credit card companies are making a percentage, right? They're absolutely making a percentage. Now, statute of limitations means they only have a certain amount of time they can do this, right? And it differs in America by the state. Some states it's 5 years. Some states it might be 7 years. If a collection agency calls you after 7 years, you can sue them, right? That's called harassment. That you're allowed to sue them. They have no jurisdiction at all. Now, as a Jew, right? You'll see why I'm bringing this up, I hope, in a second. As a Jew, you don't have the money. Statute of limitations goes, right? Or is going. And now you say, okay, I have a certain amount of money. You owed $8,000. You're willing to pay them $2.5. And you say that's all I have. And the collection agency says, okay, we'll take $2.5. Now, what about the other $5.5? Collection agency says we're closing the case. We're going to send you a letter. We close the case. So that means I don't owe the money, right? I don't owe the money. Now, the question is going to be, if they agree, you made a deal with them, you're exempt. I don't have to pay the money. Why not? Because you made a deal with them. If you didn't make a deal with them, you still owe all the money. Doesn't matter. If a Jew
reset the clock in a lot of cases too.
If a Jew declares bankruptcy and he doesn't have any money to pay suppliers, and all that, and after a certain amount of time, he still doesn't have money, he declares bankruptcy, nonetheless, he still has an obligation to pay. Even if he has to pay over 20 years, even if he has to pay in installments, right? But you're going to tell me, isn't it true according to the law? According to secular law, I don't have to pay. I declare bankruptcy. That's true. That is true. But what does that have to do with your obligation as a Jew? In other words, you say, well, it was my company. It wasn't me. There are other shareholders. You're right. You're 100% right. But we don't care about secular law. We want to know what the Torah says. And the Torah says I'm still obligated. Now, if you have gone, if a person has gone through this, and you understand what it's like to be dogged by credit card companies and to be dogged by collection agencies. These people eat rusty nails for lunch. They just don't care. They'll keep calling you. They'll keep bugging you. It doesn't really matter. And if they can't do it, they'll get someone else to do it. So
I've had to repossess some vehicles in the past.
It's not a pleasant thing to do. But
no.
In the end, if someone has gone through that and they understand that, so the empathy they can give, multiply that by infinity because they've been there. Now, so in my case, had I not gone through what I've gone through, still going through it to a certain extent, but, had I not been able to go through it, could I empathize? I definitely could empathize. Could I give good advice? Probably. But it wouldn't be the same as if I'd gone through it myself. Right? Now, God can say, you know what? I want you to help others. I want you to give them strength. And I want you to, be able to, deal with these certain things. But really, in the state you're in right now, you'd probably get a 4 out of 10. Maybe a 4.5. I want you to get to a 9. I want you to get to 9.5 to be able to relate to them, to be able to have proper empathy for them, etc. It doesn't matter why it happened. That's not even the point, right? But God could say, you know what? I want to bring something dormant. Doesn't exist by you because you never had this problem. You never had credit card debt. You never went through it. You don't know what it's like not to make it to the end of the month. You don't know what it's like not to have extra money in your pocket. Right. You don't know what it's like when you have an electric bill and in 2 days it's going to get shut off.
Medicine or food.
You have no, right? So what could God say? God could say, Coffman, you have no idea what this is like. So you know what? I'm going to teach you. And plus you deserve this anyway for any number of reasons, right? Certainly not a saint by any stretch, right? So God's going to say, okay, but what's going to be the end result? The end result is going to be, did you get the message? Did you get the message? Did you understand why I put you through this? And if you didn't, it could still go on. It go up in cycles. Go up, go down, this, that. If you got the message, very good. Doesn't mean I'm going to make you rich again. Right? Doesn't mean that. Right? But at the same time, at the same time, you got the message now. You are now, not now, thank God.
I'm not quite there yet.
You are now on your knees. Right? You are now going to understand what other people go through. Now, for how long? As much as God wants. right? As much as I don't get the message, or someone doesn't get the message, or whatever my soul has to go through. But see, something like that, obviously you have to deserve it to happen. Or God could say, you know what, he really doesn't deserve it over here. But the reality is I want to test it. And I want to see, he had all these years of plenty, all the years of good. Let's see if he's going to curse, just like Job. Is he going to curse all the goodness? Someone asked my wife this once. They said, all the people you helped over the years, did you ever have any regret? I don't have regret, right? I wish certain things would have turned out differently, but no, I don't have any regret. Because when a person says that, keep in mind, if a person says, God forbid, I can't believe this happened, and it never should have happened, and it was bad, and this and that, you lose all your mitzvahs. You absolutely lose all the good things you've done, right?
Well,
if a person
can you repeat that? Can you repeat that for me, Rabbi?
I will repeat that. If a person makes the statement and says, all the years that I had were good, right? And they say, all those years, I had that was good. This is bad and this is wrong, right? I'll say better. I regret. If a person says, I regret helping all these people, I regret funding the institution I funded. When you say I regret, you lose everything. You lose all your mitzvahs. Now, you can say it was hard. You can say it was a big test, whatever. But if you say...
Chutes and ladders. You remember that game, Rabbi? Chutes and ladders. Snakes and ladders.
What? Meaning what?
I'm sorry?
Meaning what?
A board game. I mean, life can be like that. Sometimes I've noticed points in my life where it just seems it doesn't matter what to do, all the way back down to the beginning. And when you make a statement like, you lose all your mitzvahs, it's like, some days, I don't know.
But again, a person can have difficulty, right? A person can have struggle. But when a person says, I regret the good that I did, that's saying, I don't want to have anything to do with God. What you did was a mistake. That is problematic.
Okay.
I mean, somebody here asked, I'll deal with it now because I just saw it. Somebody asked, is it wrong to win? No, it's not wrong to win the struggle. That's what struggles are about. Either I succeed or I fail. But remember, even if you fail, right? Even if you win, you're going to have other struggles, right? If a person never gets any struggles, let's say like this. Let's say a person's born into the Rockefeller family. If a person's born in the Rockefeller family, you don't have any problems with money, right? There are no problems with money over here. So you're not going to have a money issue, right? Unless you blow it. But normally you're not going to have a money issue. So somebody who's got money, fine. That doesn't mean they don't have other issues. Not only that, if there are people that have it easy, they have it easy with money, with other things it could be, and I'm not saying it is, but it could very well be that they're getting their Olam Haba, their next world right now. In other words, God says, I have to give reward to somebody who did a mitzvah. Yep, that's only fair.
That's it.
Right? But what if he's evil? What if he's evil? So you want to punish him. You don't want to have an portion in the world to come, depending how bad he is. Right? So if you're going to knock him off in the next world, God says, I don't want to have anything to do with you. He still has to repay him in this world. Repaying them in this world means everything goes easy for them. They have money, fame, power. They have all these things, right? And everything's good for them. But the only thing is they're going to get slaughtered when they die. Meaning when they die like a dog. Nothing happens. They don't have a portion of the world to come. It's over. So that's why some people have it easy, right? That's the question. Why do evil people have it easy? Could very well be because God's giving them their Olam Haba in this world, right? God's given them their Olam Haba now. We don't want it now. We want it later. So isn't it better that I have trials and tribulations? Isn't it better I struggle? Certainly in this world. Not only that, if I suffer, God forbid in this world, that takes away from transgression. In other words, I can come out squeaky clean because I suffer a lot in this world and I go to heaven, I don't have any sins, right? But a person, even if they suffer in this world, they're probably going to suffer later as well. But the only way suffering in this world atones is if they admit that God is punishing them for their sins. So let's say someone is going to say, you know what?
Be honest with themselves.
I'm suffering over here. I'm on my deathbed, and okay, woe to me, I'm going to die soon. But they don't look at their suffering as coming from God for an atonement. So we don't say, well, when a person suffers in this world, that means it atones for them automatically. That doesn't exist. That 100% doesn't exist. It only exists if you admit that the suffering comes upon me because I sinned. Then it atones. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it atones for everything. I mean, it could, depending on how much a person suffers, etc. But, that's going to atone. If a person doesn't admit that, it doesn't atone. But somebody who has it easy in this world, if they have it easy in this world, we can assume that later on, it's not going to be so easy. Or if they're going to have anything later on, they're going to suffer, right? They are definitely going to suffer, and they certainly could lose their portion in the world to come. So the righteous are going to suffer because for their small amount of sins, God has to pay them back in this world, so they're squeaky clean in the next world. Other people are going to suffer any number of reasons, but if someone really has it easy, they don't suffer, then that means potentially they're spiritually cut off in the next world. Now, we can't say that about everybody. We don't really know, but that is the general answer of why people are going to suffer. Now, we say in our prayer books every day, Jews say, do not bring me to trial and tribulation. But if you don't have trials and tribulations, you don't grow. See, if we would understand every day, let's say a person's successful in business, they have a great wife, great spouse, great kids and all that, and they're truly humble. And they pray every day like it's Yom Kippur. And they say, wow, I don't really deserve this. You're giving me all this and, all that. And you're truly humble because you don't want to lose it. You never want to lose anything. You have to fight for every last thing that we have because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Right? That's what we said. That's what we said, last week. That, when I'm free, I will study. Well, you don't know what today is going to bring.
That's right.
You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You could have all the greatest intention. All the greatest intention in the world. My language will not butter the biscuit. Right? We just don't know. We just don't know what's going to be. So therefore, I have to take every day, even if I failed yesterday, even if I failed the day before, I have to take every day for what it is and live to the best of my ability. Right? And do what God wants and take into account how I spoke against other people. Did I praise God properly? Did I pray properly? Did I make blessing? Like there are a myriad of things. Person goes to sleep, you never want to wake up the next morning. You just if a person would take stock every single day of what they do, and then you know exactly where you're holding. But you have to take it seriously. You can't just blow it off. You can say, well, I did this bad, yesterday, I'll try better tomorrow. But you really know you're going to do the same thing tomorrow also. Right? So that doesn't mean anything. Right? But you have to work. You have to struggle. That's what life is. Life is a constant struggle. Sometimes certain things may be easier. Sometimes things are more difficult. But, when it comes to, someone here points out, very true, when it comes to health, we take health for granted. Why do we take health for granted? Very simple. Because if I can do things and nothing hurts, so we take that for granted until something does hurt. It doesn't have to necessarily be something serious. A person twisted their ankle. Person hit their, hurt their finger. They did, they hurt some part of their body, and now when that part of the body heals, then you say, wow, I guess I don't really realize what it is until we don't have it or until it gets injured. Right? So comes along the evil inclination, as we said, the evil inclination of a person admits. Person admits, they're going to say, okay, I'm going to do this mitzvah now. The evil inclination is going to work hard to make sure that we don't do it or push us off. So the evil inclination when we're younger, and I wish I would have learned this when I was younger, and that is what does the evil inclination do? What is this fight between the good inclination, the bad inclination? The soul wants you to go after good, wants you to do mitzvahs, give charity, all these things. The body wants you to go after the physical. So once the soul goes into the body, it's kind of trapped, even though the soul should really disintegrate the body. It's kind of trapped. So when the soul does the right thing, meaning the person does the right thing to get closer to God, the soul shines to a certain extent, right? Uplifts the soul, uplifts the body. When the person goes after the body, It debases the body, debases the soul, right? That's what it does. So there's a constant struggle till you die. There's a constant struggle between the good inclination, the evil inclination. So when we're younger, what does the evil inclination tell us to do? Do whatever you want. Go after any desires you want. You retire when you're 65, then you'll see the world, you learn a little bit, right? Go after your base desires, push off learning and anything that has to do with holiness until we're old. Problem is, you might, you could get old, a lot quicker than you think, and then you can't do things. Then your mind doesn't work, right? Don't get that CAT scan. You don't want to know what's in that brain. You don't want to know what's in that brain of yours, right? So we don't know. We absolutely don't know. I just read something earlier today, an interesting thing that Avigdor Miller, one of the Torah giants of the last generation, of blessed memory, was talking about anger and how bad anger is, right? Even if it's deserved anger. He says, what happens when a person has a stroke? Right? He was brilliant in spiritual things, in how the body works, from duties of the heart and the Avos of Avos, and he says, what happens? The person gets angry. The person gets really angry. The Talmud says the person gets so angry that even the pit of hell, if it was over him, he wouldn't change. That's how, even if it's deserved, the person is really upset, right? Now, what happens when a person gets upset? When a person gets upset, he gets adrenaline. Right? Adrenaline goes to the body.
Sure.
Right? What happens when adrenaline goes to the body? Right? So your blood pressure goes up. What happens when blood pressure goes up? Normally, through your brain, blood goes. When blood goes, it goes one by one. Right? It doesn't just go in a surge. If it goes into a surge, what happens? Your head explodes. Right? What do I mean when your head explodes? You have a stroke. That could literally cause a stroke, right? So, Avigdor Miller says that if a person really gets angry, right? If a person truly gets angry, what happens? He gets all this adrenaline, gets his blood pumping, right? Now he's got a high blood pressure, right? What could that cause? It could cause one of two things. It could cause diabetes, right? That can certainly cause diabetes, but it could also cause a stroke. How could it cause a stroke? Because blood, when it flows, it goes in order, right? It goes one by one. It doesn't just come in a burst, right? So he says what could happen is the person gets so angry, right? This is physically. Even if it's deserved, the person gets ticked off and he's burning mad. He's got all this adrenaline. Now, sometimes it's good. You have to fight against somebody. You need this adrenaline, whatever. But if it's out of anger, okay. If it's out of anger, what can happen? What can happen is a person can have a stroke because you have that burst of energy. That burst of energy goes to the blood. That blood is curdling now. And the person is so rip-roaring mad, blood pressure goes sky high, and then it surges and destroys the brain, right? It goes too fast. When it goes too fast, that's what a stroke is, right? So over here, a person's going to say, well, I'll do this when I'm old. But who says you're going to have the capability to do it? Who's going to say the brain works? Maybe get dementia when you're younger, when you're not as old. So when we're old, even if we make it and our brain still works, what is the evil inclination going to do? The evil inclination is going to try to convince us, you know what? I don't think the same way I used to. My brain doesn't work the same way. How am I going to understand Torah if my brain is just not as capable as it once was? So a person's going to say, I can't do it, and it's too hard, and I can't think like that anymore. I don't have the energy. I don't have this. What's going to happen at the end of their lives? They're going to be totally cooled off from wanting to do anything spiritually. That's what the evil inclination is going to say. Or the evil inclination can say, relax. You never went to Mexico. You never went to Hawaii. You should go to New Zealand, see all these things before you die. You put it on your grave. Went to New Zealand, went to this place, all these things. But what it's going to do is it's going to totally cool you off, right? And therefore, it's going to make someone less likely want to have anything to do with anything spiritual. That's how the evil inclination can say, your mind doesn't work the same. This doesn't work the same. Okay, you learn a little bit here, a little bit there, but it's going to push you off. Totally going to push you off not to do anything, right? So therefore, we have to be like the Energizer Bunny. We're going to be all excited about Torah and wanting to learn, even if we're tired and different things, because that's going to push us. That's going to push us to work on ourselves spiritually. Doesn't mean we're always successful. But if we push things off, we're a little bit lazy. We'll say, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it the next week. Who says you're going to have the time? Who says you're going to have the drive? And the more you push that off, the less likely you're going to do it. Now, does it mean a person won't do it? Doesn't necessarily mean that, but they'll be cooled off enough that it's going to be very hard to do. Question.
I just wanted to ask about priorities. I mean, I find, and I've met a lot of B'nai Noach that just spend all their days surfing social media, and it's their version of studying. It's all they do. And, sometimes it appears to be out of whack priorities. And I know we got a lot of social lockdown around the globe, but I mean, is there not a point in time that
I'll say like this. I'll say like this, a person who's looking at social media and they're looking for inspiration, they're looking for classes, they want to learn, okay? If they're on social media because it's fun, put up pictures, look at other things, and they push away really what they should be doing. Now, in Noahide, doesn't have the same obligation as a Jew to learn every second of every day, right? Certainly by Jewish men out there, unless they're working or have other priorities that they have to do, where, family priorities, other things, whatever it is. A non-Jew doesn't have that. But if a non-Jew doesn't learn, right, if they don't learn, on a regular basis, doesn't matter for how long, but if they don't learn on a regular basis, their mind will also go to mush, right? That's what will happen. If they waste their time, and I see plenty of Jews also wasting their time on social media, they're not going to get anywhere. They might hear a class here, a class there, or they waste their time doing other things, right? Let's say I see plenty of people, put up there playing this game, playing that game, playing the other game. Okay, right? I'm not saying, for a non-Jew, they can't play games, but, the more a person gets into it, the more addictive it is. When I was growing up, I was never addicted to it, thank God. But people got addicted to Dungeons and Dragons, right? I don't remember Dungeons and Dragons, this old, whatever, this old game, fantasy game, whatever. So when video games came out, that probably destroyed it. Who played board games anymore, right? You got Donkey Kong, you got Asteroids, you got all the, Pac-Man. I'm already dating myself. Whatever, you got all these games I used to play as a kid, certainly young adult or whatever, right? It's fun, right? No question about it. But the more you play,
hang out, yeah.
The way you play, the more you play, people say, like when it comes to Candy Crush, it's addicting. Of course it's addicting, right? It makes perfect sense. Right, some people may be addicted to, game show channel, or sports. You fill in the blank. Doesn't have to be video games, right? But even by a non-Jew, all that is going to just waste time. And the more time you waste, the more your brain goes to mush. The more your brain goes to mush, the more you don't want to learn, right? And you're going to learn even less, and even less, and even less, right? So you have to nip it in the bud. Right, I would say you have to absolutely nip it in the bud because if you don't set proper priorities, then what's going to happen is you'll never do it. Right? In other words, person's going to say, I want to go on a diet. Right? They're going to say, okay, a month goes by. They say, how's your diet going? They're going to say, how's your diet going? You say, well, I haven't really done anything. It was just a nice idea. The beautiful idea. I mean, it's true. I need to go on a diet.
The thought that counts.
Right, the thought counts, but you still don't lose any weight, right? You're still carrying excess weight. So thoughts really don't matter. It's about what I do, But what I'm saying is a person's thoughts in this case are going to have a negative effect on them. Why? Because now their thoughts are convoluted with addiction, right? They like playing video games. They like, someone said, well, it's so much easier, a Jew told me this, it's so much easier playing video games than sitting and learning Torah. I said, of course it is. He said, wow, how can you explain that? I said, because it's a lot more fun. You don't have to use your brain. It's a lot more addictive. And you're enjoying yourself because you never enjoyed yourself learning, because you never learned with somebody, right? So you don't know what the enjoyment of learning is. But if you have something like that, that's, seemingly a lot more fun, in physical terms, then it makes sense, right? That will make perfect sense unless you just give it up, right? Or you minimize it. But the problem is, the more you're into it, when it comes to sports or when it comes to movies and entertainment and other things, person can get over addicted. Watching TV is the same thing, right? Whatever it is. So therefore the evil inclination said, now give him a little bit more. His team's in the World Series. It's his favorite movies coming up. All these different things. Because what that does is it cools down a person spiritually from what they really should be doing. And the more they get into these other things, the less they get into spirituality. So by the end of their life, they're never going to have a chance. They're just going to be cooled off so much. It's not going to happen. You have to start somewhere, right? So the advice that we need to take is we have to learn, be involved in learning Torah, especially when we're young. Now, if we didn't have that opportunity, even if we're older now, right? Even if we're older now, we have to take this into consideration. That even if a person's relatively young, they're not so old, you don't push it off. You don't ever push off learning and say, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. Because we understand if a person's learning and they take one day off from learning, they take a step back or 2 steps back. So now the next day, I have to learn twice as much or more in order to get to where I was before. Now, let's say really you're supposed to learn every day. So let's say you learn 4 days out of the week.
Everywhere.
Right? 4 days out of the week is good. You learn 4 days out of the week. 3 days in between, in a row, whatever it is, you don't learn. Right? So I took 2 steps forward on Sunday. I took another 2 steps forward on Monday. Tuesday, I didn't do anything. I take 3 steps back. So I'm still +1. Right? Comes along Wednesday. I learned. That's beautiful. I'm +3. Right? Comes Thursday. Thursday comes along. I'm now back to 0. Come Friday, I didn't learn. I'm now -4, -3. Come Saturday, I learn. I'm back to -2. That's after a week. Imagine that's done over a month. Imagine it's done over 6 months. Imagine if it's done over a year. Right? If we can imagine that, what that's going to mean is even if you learned a lot, you may still be at -250,000. Which maybe a lot of people may be at that level. Because as much as they learned, they got distracted. When they got distracted, when they could have learned, right? It's said that a person can say 200 words a minute. 200 words a minute, if you're learning Torah, is 200 mitzvahs. If a person learns, 8 hours a day, that's 60,000 mitzvahs, let's say. So 60,000 mitzvahs a person gets, 300,000 mitzvahs a week. That's 1.2 million mitzvahs a month. Right? 12 million or give or take mitzvahs out of the year. But if I wasted time during that time, so instead of getting 60,000, I got 20,000. Right? Or I got negative numbers. Right? You can't make that up. You lost it. Right? In other words, if it's possible you made some of it up, good. But you're not going to be able to make up all of it. So when you lost it, you lost it. So the thing is, when a person's learning, you have time to learn that, you have to make the most of it. If you're not learning, fine. But if you could have learned when you didn't, right? The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says, if a person learned when they didn't have to learn, if the person did not learn when they could have learned, right? The Yerushalmi there says, God can look the other way according to the big three. If a person sinned where they murdered, God forbid, or did idolatry, or committed immorality, right? Those three for a Jew, if a non-Jew would say, bow down to this guy in the stick, or reference to JC, right? Or short little fat guy, Mr. Buddha himself, to say, bow down or die, right? You have to be willing to die. Same thing by immorality. Same thing by murder, right? So says the Jerusalem Talmud, God accepts repentance for all those three. For all those three. But if a person had the opportunity to learn and they don't learn, God doesn't accept. That you cannot repent from.
Stubbornness.
Now someone is going to ask and get a little bit ticked off, I'm sure, and say, the big three, you have an obligation to give up your life for. You have to sanctify God's name. If you don't sanctify God's name, okay, you transgress, right? You transgress the Torah prohibition. But if I didn't learn when I could have, why is that so bad? Right? Because what you're telling God is it's not important to me. And it really doesn't matter. Oh, the big three, look how important they are. You're right. But if a person had an opportunity to do something and they don't, then they say, yeah, it's not really such a big deal. So God says, I can forgive a lot of things. I can forgive even the big three. But you had an opportunity to learn, and you're busy playing Donkey Kong or Candy Crush when you could have learned. God says, I can't accept that. That is totally unacceptable. Right? You say, well, it's my evil inclination. You're right. Of course you have an evil inclination. But you have an opportunity over here. Right? And you should never think as well that the older I am, I can't learn. Right? Or it's too late, because that's the evil inclination. Oh, you can't do it. Your brain doesn't work so well. Your body is weaker. Remember, when did Rabbi Akiva start learning? Rabbi Akiva started learning at what age? The age of 40. Now, Rabbi Akiva went to school to learn the Aleph Beis with his 5-year-old. Imagine a 40-year-old trying to fit in the seat of a 5-year-old, right? He became, the Torah giant of his generation. But he only started learning at the age of 40, right? So what does that mean for us? So no matter how old we are, we still have a chance. So someone will say, I'm never going to become a Torah giant. I'm never going to become one of the great rabbis of the generation. Maybe true. Maybe true. So the evil inclination will say, you're never really going to get that far. How much can you really accomplish? And what's the answer? You have no idea until you start. I started at a later age. So, in my early 20s, I really started learning. I had a little bit of advantage because I could read Hebrew. I knew how to pray to a certain extent. So I started at a certain advantage, right? But at the same time, when it came to real learning, and I was coming as a hot shot my third year of a top university, didn't help. Didn't help because I had to start at the bottom with everybody else there, right? Or at least in this class. Started at the bottom. Didn't really know what Mishnah was. Didn't know what Talmud was. Didn't know Jewish law to a certain extent. What it related to. This, that. Had to start at the bottom. But it doesn't mean, that, okay, you start at the bottom, that's where you stay. If you're growing, you're doing the right thing. I had an advantage, so I could sit and learn full time. Right? But I had to make up. Stuff that I didn't learn when I was younger. So I had to cram things in and, so I had an advantage some other people might not have had. Very true. That very well may be true. But I will say, day in and day out, going through, one text, another, next page, more in depth, this, Jewish law, Jewish philosophy, Chumash, Musar, ethics, all these different things, you could say, well, all you do is sit and learn all day. Anyone who wants to try, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, for X amount of time, well, he's still going to make money, right? Most people have to make money. But let's say you didn't need to make money. Let's say you have enough money. Try it. It's taxing on the brain, right? We only maximize 3% of our brains, right? It's not an easy thing over here to put our mindset into the mindset of the Torah. right? This is what I do on a weekly basis, trying to get Jews and non-Jews to think what it means to be a Jew, and to understand that. Now, most people think, oh, all you do is, you sit and learn in these ancient texts. Try it, right? Try and understand it, for more than 20 minutes, right? For more than half an hour. Try it for a certain amount of time. Most people couldn't keep their butt in the seat that long because they have ADD. Not saying that they do, right? But they have ADD of Torah. They start thinking about this. Oh, I got to go out and do this, do that. This really isn't relevant to my life, right? It's not an easy thing to do, right? No, especially if you're not making so much money, but people don't give it any credibility. Say, oh, he's only learning all day. This person's got an MBA. Okay. He's got a PhD, pilot higher and deeper. Oh, we're going to give all this respect to a PhD. Now, I'm not going to come belittle it. People write a 100-page paper. They have to take oral exams, right? That is kind of impressive. I agree, right? But it's only learning one aspect of one subject. We give it a lot more credibility, I think, than it deserves, right? But even so, people say, oh, I had someone once tell me, you have all these books. How can a person ever go through all of them? I said, well, I know people who have, right? My Rebbe's gone through everything. He knows everything, right? So it's not impossible. Right, he happens to have a photographic memory. He happened to sleep only 2 hours a night. Whatever. He's, gifted in many, many ways. Many, many ways. But he worked very, very hard to get to where he is. I don't come in, I don't even scratch his toenails to where he is. I got a long way to go. Tremendous long way to go in so many different things. Yeah, but you have to have that fire lit. You have to have that fire lit within inside. You can't let the evil inclination get a hand over here. And you can't let him say, oh, it's too late. They'll never accept you. You really can't do it. You're a loser. I mean, you might be, but you can't do this. The evil inclination goes absolutely ballistic. You know what we do? And we believe it. We say, you're right. The Jewish community's not going to accept me. How can I learn this language? It's so hard. Evil inclination has a lot of arguments. A lot of very, very good, solid arguments. So what we have to do, to the best of our ability, is kick the evil inclination upside the head and say, it doesn't matter. I'm going to work hard, right? I'm going to get people to teach me. I'm going to learn. I'm going to want to learn. But you have to have that fire lit. And the difficulty is we get beaten down in life. Illness, parnasa, livelihood issues, all kinds of things with our kids, things with our spouses, all kinds of things. All kinds of things that can take us away. That is why.
So what do you say to those that have felt beaten down in life?
I would say, first of all, read the book of Psalms. I don't think anyone was beaten more down in life than King David himself. And all he did was say, Shvisi Hashem, let me dwell in your house, right? All the days of my life. We say Psalm 27, right? In the month of Elul, right? It's all about wanting to draw close to God. So what a person has to realize is we all have tests and trials. We all have difficulties. Some more, some less. But what a person has to do in a certain way is compartmentalize. What do I mean? I mean that a person has to realize where everything comes from. If we understand everything comes from God, we've spoken about this before. If I understand these things happen because God wants me to go through these difficulties or whatever, or I did it to myself, in the end, we have to realize it's not a bad thing over here. God wants us to learn from this. And if we realize it all comes from God, essentially, then what it does is it makes me realize that, okay, there's a higher purpose. I have to become better, right? And now, a person's got an electric bill they have to pay the next day or in 2 days. Okay, you have to figure out how you're going to do that, before you get electricity shut off and all that. But, a person at the same time, while you're doing that, you still, if you don't learn Torah and you don't learn Musar, it's worse.
What else you doing?
It's worse. You're trying to figure out that you're so beaten down in life, you fall into depression. Some have minor depression. Some could have major depression. There are a lot of things. A lot of things in our lives we could say, okay, we can look at things as being bad. Everything being bad. I know some people that they're just purely negative. Everything that comes out of their mouth is negative.
Critical.
They have money, their kids are healthy, grandkids are healthy, but okay, I'm not saying their life is perfect, by any stretch, but, they have difficulties, certain difficulties. But if you look at the positives, then I'm not saying the negative disappears, right? But if a person lived their lives the way the Torah wants, the person has no negatives. There's no negativity, no matter how hard it is. Right? Nachum Ish Gamzu, the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva, Nachum Ish Gamzu said everything is good. Now, he was a paraplegic. He had sores all over his body. To him, nothing was bad. Rabbi Akiva said, Kol David Rachmana Latov of it. Sorry, Kol David Rachmana. Everything that God does is for the good. Nachum Ish Gamzu said, no, everything is good. You can always find the good, in something. So the question is how we look at it. And a person can be overcritical. A person can say, oh, this is bad, that's bad, whatever. And they're negative. And negativity shortens a person's life. Now, on the other hand, a person can be extremely happy. It does not mean that everything in their life is going easy. It does not mean, they're whistling Dixie every single, minute of the day. It means they know how to control things. It means that, they see things in the bigger scheme of things. So you're going to ask me, okay, so a person gets beaten down. I would tell people, take out a piece of paper and write 20 things. I would say 10, but okay, I'll be generous here. Right? I'm in a good mood. Say 20 things. 20 things that you're happy with, that you're thankful for. 20. Right? Whatever they are. Could be health, could be your kids, could be your job, could be, whatever it is. Write these things that make you aware of the good things that you have. Things that you're thankful for. Now, when a person gets angry and a person has difficulty, before you light this list on fire and you rip it up, read it. Read it once, read it twice, read it a third time. Now, it doesn't mean the difficulty is not difficult. That's not what we're saying. But when a person, let's say the top 5, right? I'll give a few. A person, if they're healthy, right? They don't have any health issues, right? They're probably top of the list. Livelihood, not bad. Doesn't mean they're rich, but they're paying their bills, right? Livelihood is good. They have a spouse. Things are good with their spouse, with their kids, right? These are things to be absolutely thankful for. Now, just because you have an electric bill that has to be paid tomorrow, otherwise going to get cut off. Okay, it's not really the end of the world in the bigger scheme of things. But it's like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. What am I going to do? They're going to cut off my electricity. It's true. Right? And a person's in panic. I understand. I've been there. I've definitely been there. Right? So it doesn't mean that I don't have to deal with it. But in the bigger scheme of things in life, if that's the worst thing, right, you should be whistling Dixie. You should be so happy. Right? And I've always said, and I shouldn't curse myself here, right? But I've always said in the last 15 years, last 16 years, difficulties that I've had, right? They've been mostly in the pocket. Mostly. Been other things. I'm not saying just that. Right? But if it's only been that, I have what to be thankful for. I have 3 daughters, that are married, and, some people have older kids, that aren't married.
Had some grandchildren last year, yes?
I had some grandchildren, right? I have another daughter, in the Parsha right now that, looking for someone at the moment. But in general, all three of them met their future spouses in a short amount of time. Right? So I told my wife that even with all the, financial difficulties that go with it, I'll take the financial difficulty any day than have a kid of mine be the age of 35 and not married. That is excruciating, right? Really? That would be something excruciating. And there are people that go through it. There are people that have, I have a friend of mine. He's got a daughter. My oldest daughter's age about 26, Very good catch, not married. It's excruciating. Excruciating for the girl, excruciating for the parents. People say, well, 26 not that old. And then, in our circles, the older you get, the harder it is. They say, you get married when someone's young and dumb. So they don't have any criteria. They don't have any, they don't have any baggage. They don't have any things that are going to stop them. They don't have any dreams of what they think, because now, they have a degree, they have a good job, they have other things, and whatever, it's harder. The older a person gets, it's harder. But the thing is, you're going to say, but it wasn't easy financially to marry a few kids. I agree. 100%. Right? But if that's where the trial was, I'll take that any day. Why? Because, the families that my kids married into, gold. Right? Absolute gold. That's not a small thing. That's not a small thing at all. So for that, I'm tremendously blessed. Right? They say if you get along with the other side, it's also good. Right? It's not a guarantee. Right? Different mentalities, different ways how you grew up, other things. Right? But all things being equal, having a bunch of girls home, 27, 25, this, that, not married, that'd be a hard thing to swallow. Yeah, that'd be a very hard thing. It doesn't matter if you're financially stable. Yeah. Being financially stable, but they're still not married off. Right? That's, so I would say,
I see where you're coming from.
Be extremely thankful for that. Okay, you want money too? Don't be a pig. You're not going to have, some have it easier, some have it more difficult, whatever it is. But, if a person has the merit to marry off kids, and, the marriages are good and the in-laws, they get along with and everything's good, you should be whistling Dixie. That's an amazing thing. Doesn't always happen that way. So, again, the question is how you look at things. You could be rich in one way, you could be poor in another way. And nobody wants any of this. No one wants any of these trials. They want to have enough money. They want to marry their kids, at the right time. We want all these good things. Doesn't always work out that way. A person can have health issues, can have other issues. There are a million things, that a person can go through. Question is, in the bigger scheme of things, how do we view it? So whatever the difficulty is, I would say in practical terms, make a list of things that you are thankful for. And what should happen, unless you get so angry you rip it up, which can also happen. The person can say, I don't care, this is really hard. That may be true. Right? But if a person really thinks about the things they have to be thankful for, it does not mean this thing goes away by itself.
No.
Right? It doesn't mean we're not angry about it. We're not upset. We're not
obliged to do something.
It doesn't mean that. What it means is I have an equilibrium in order how to view the world. When you have that equilibrium, you understand how God runs the world. You understand that purpose. And you put it into action. Once you do that, all these other things are really minor. They're minor in comparison. Right? That's what it is. Right? That is exactly what it is. So, that's the whole point. A person does not want to get distracted, and seeing everything as being bad. Because everything is not necessarily bad, right? So, some people, as difficult as the trial may be, what do they say? They say, God, you just gave me an opportunity to work on my character trait of anger, right? Now, try that. Before you burst out and scream and yell and rip something or put a hole in your wall or anything else, you say, God, look, you're giving me a golden opportunity to work on my anger. How many people do that? I'm not taking a survey. But in theory, that's what we should be saying, right? The Avos of Avos and duties of the heart and the gate of belief, faith and belief. He says a person damages you, whatever it is, you should walk up to them, give them a big hug, right? You should give them a big hug. Why? Because they're giving you an opportunity to work on yourself, right? And instead of giving a person a hug, what would most people do? They'll slap them upside the head. They'll curse them. Yeah, question.
Well, I don't mean to be chomping at the bit here. It's just I have my own personal struggles. And I know that the rabbis, they build a fence around Torah for a reason, and that fence is to serve a purpose. Even in my own life, though, there's been certain aspects. I know I fail miserably in certain situations, so I try to put up some sort of safeguard to avoid that. But then, the test comes, and it just, I have a tendency in certain situations, want nothing to do with this, want nothing to do with that. And sometimes I come across harsh. The point is, I know that if I get involved, mingle, dabble, it's gonna get ugly. And so I don't waste, walk away. I need to know when I can walk away. And so I put up a safeguard. I clash with certain type of people. There's just certain type of people, and I just avoid them totally.
Listen, the person has to know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses is. But I will say that if a person does something, once they do it once, that's forbidden. Then they do it a second time. Then it becomes nature of habit. Once it becomes nature of habit, it's part of your psyche. Once it's part of your psyche, it's very hard to fight. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, right? So we mentioned a few weeks ago, or a number of weeks ago, we mentioned that a person should work on their thoughts, because once something becomes part of your thoughts, becomes part of your psyche. Once it's part of your psyche, it's over, right? I'm not saying it's totally over, but it's very, very hard to fight against. Because if a person in a certain situation let off some steam, got angry, the situation comes up again, right? And the person got angry. The third time, of course, he's going to get angry because he got angry the last two. But if a person realizes what they've done, now you understand there's a trigger. So now the trigger, you got to, take a walk, go outside, right? Now, Achashverosh does that to Haman. He doesn't want to kill him. So he walks outside because he's boiling mad. He doesn't want to kill him. And then, they start chopping down his garden. And they all say, Haman told us. And he comes back in. He sees him crouched on his wife's bed. And, that's the end, right? But sometimes we have to know what situations not to get into because we know what the end result is. Now, that's not being a wuss. That's knowing you will explode. That is knowing you will never succeed, right? And that's, that's okay. Not just because I like you, but that's okay because you know what your limitations are. And a person can't say, or they shouldn't say, you know what? I'm going to put myself in this situation because, okay, I know how to deal with it now. I'm going to hit it head on. Now, I wouldn't tell people to do that.
Well, they're dabbling with trouble, right?
Because you still may fail, right? But, a person will learn this the hard way. They say, I'm ready. I'm going to do it. They're loggerheads. They put everything into it, and the same thing happens again. Or maybe it happens a little bit less, right? But not going near it does not make a person a wuss. Not going near it, a person understands their limitation. If they understand their limitation, they fight against it like the plague because they don't want to be in the same situation. The Rambam says, the laws of repentance, the Rambam says, if you're put in the situation you failed, you're put in the exact same situation and you succeed, that's called complete repentance. But he's not telling you to fight it head on to tempt yourself. That's being a masochist. No one would say that. If you're in that same situation, and you overcame it, that's one thing, right? If you failed, okay, you failed it again. If it happens the third time, you overcome it. He says that's complete repentance. Because maybe it's a fluke. Maybe it's a fluke over here that you beat it. But if a person beat it once and they come in the same situation again, there's a good chance they hopefully can beat it again. But you do not want to put yourself in that situation. As we would say in the vernacular, you do not want to tempt fate. Yeah, you have a question, thought?
Well, even things like anger, I believe the rabbis teach that its sheer existence is permitted by Hashem or allowed to be. It can serve a purpose, and we're supposed to keep an eye on ourselves to put ourselves in check with that. Isn't that why anger exists?
No, that's true, but you can also use anger for good, right? If a person, Avigdor Miller said, if a person uses that adrenaline against his enemy, he has to fight against his enemy. And he's anger. And that anger is going to get this adrenaline going. It's going to help him overcome his enemy. That's good. That is good. But even if a person has to train their kids and they have to show anger, the Rambam says 100% you should fake it. Yeah. Even if you have to punishment, all the psychologists will tell you should never, ever come out of anger. Ever. Because punishment that comes out of anger is never good. But even if you have to punish, you have to be on an even equilibrium. And even if you have to fake the anger should never be within. Yeah, it should never, ever be within. Right? If you can't fake it, then don't do it. Right? Then don't do it. But you should never, ever discipline out of anger. And even if you have to show anger, you have to make sure, and this is not an easy thing to do, you have to make sure it's not going to penetrate. Right? Because if it penetrates, then that's going to be, that's going to be a problem. And again, we're our own worst enemy. Person could be tired, hungry, any number of things, and they're in a situation, they just lose it. Right? But normally they wouldn't lose it. The problem is there are other factors. Right? Try and do things when you've got 2 hours of sleep, or 3 hours of sleep, or, a person's got a lot of little kids at home or teenagers that are driving you up the wall, right? So normally you have a way to react. Normally, you're calm, etc. But there are other times they could push your buttons and you just lash out because, any number of reasons. And these reasons could be 100% legit. So a person has to be careful. But you're going to say, well, we're throwing things at us all the time. We go through 70 mood swings in an hour. That's true. You're right, probably more. Right? That's very true. And even if it's true, we still have to be firmly planted in the ground. That's why, as we said, you have to be constantly thinking words of Torah. Constantly learning as much as possible in order to train ourselves. Take us our lifetime to do this. Okay, but I guarantee you, I'll say in my own life, I'll use myself as an example. I am in no way, shape, or form the same person I was, in my early 20s. Certainly not when I was in my early 30s, right? Because I went through all kinds of different things, right? So, we gained, we might have lost as well, right? We might have suffered any of these things, but obviously the older we get, the more we understand, the more hopefully wise we are. We don't make the same mistakes, or try not to. But our buttons could be pushed. We don't look at it the same way. We don't deal with it the same way. If a person's under pressure, there are other things going on, lack of sleep, this, that. Okay, it can affect us in a negative way, in something that never should have. Right? A person can make a comment or say something under duress. And normally they wouldn't have said it. Right? But we mentioned, I don't know how this comes up every week. We mentioned with Mr. Edelman, right? With this guy from the Miami Heat. And he said he wasn't under duress. He was playing a stupid video game. Right? And he said something that now he got caught saying. So that means it was part of his psyche. He can't say, oh, it was a slip of the tongue. Yeah, it was a slip of the tongue. You shouldn't have said it, you idiot. But now you got caught. Right? Now you absolutely got caught saying something anti-Semitic. Okay. Right? But once it's part of your psyche and a person thinks that, let's say that it doesn't matter who you say it to. You say it to a child. A person says it to their spouse. They say something that, I regret saying that. But okay. So you have to apologize, this, that. But the problem is you let it in your brain. You thought it. It's part of your psyche. You went over it a lot of times, and now, bam, it comes out.
Prudence, dude, yeah.
It comes out when you didn't want it to come out, but it's there. Right? So we said before, you cannot let it in. Forget about thinking about it. Forget about the person deserves it and whatever. You cannot let it be part of your psyche. Once it's part of your psyche, you have to work hard to fight against it, because that
it's
could
like a loaded mousetrap.
That could, yeah. You're a powder keg. You could say something you never in a million years had, you never in a million years wanted to say. Right? But the problem is now you offended someone. Now you said something that absolutely never should have been said. But now you can't use the excuse and say, oh, that was a slip of the tongue. It was a slip of the tongue. There's no question.
You can't reel it back in.
You can't reel it back in, but it's still part of you. So it makes it that much more difficult. So therefore, everything we're saying over here is you have to control the mind. You have to control your spiritual side to the extent where I'm working on the right things and trying to be a better person. And now I want to work and implement it. Right? It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder said than done. Right? But if a person never learns it and they push it off, then okay, then it just perpetuates. And you keep going through the same things. It's like, it's like I always say, it's like this bad Freddy Krueger movie. You just keep going back in the same dream and over and over and over, right? You never overcome it. That's why a person may need therapy and they need to go, do other things in order to work on it. But within Torah, to a certain extent, a person can train themselves to do this. It takes time, it takes effort, right? It takes quite a bit of effort to do.
It's not an instant cure.
But the problem is that we're in certain situations where under pressure, we don't have time, we don't give it time, and we go against what we should do based on our own insecurities, based on other things. But if we'd focus on what we should do spiritually, attaching ourselves to God at the highest level, whatever we can do, and continual learning, putting that part of our lives, that makes this a lot easier. Now, that does not mean that the evil inclination, kills over and dies. You're going to say, oh, you're going to work on this? You're going to be so strong learning Musar? I'm going to get you over here. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. So you know what? The evil inclination doesn't stop. He doesn't stop. So therefore, even if the evil inclination comes this way, you got to fight it a different way. Right now, it was something you wouldn't have thought of, something you wouldn't have necessarily worked on. So, okay, now I have this situation. So now I have to deal with it, and I have to make sure it doesn't come up again. I have to work hard. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen is you do that, you work on that. The evil inclination says, okay, I'll try something else. And the evil inclination has a lot of patience. It has a heck of a lot more patience than we do. Right? Because we want everything done now, want to learn now, want to have it all now. It doesn't happen that way. Right? The evil inclination got plenty of patience. Right? All it has to do, as we've said before, all it has to do is make a little bit of a hole in the armor. Once it makes a hole in the armor, eventually it'll become bigger if we allow it to. But the evil inclination can say, okay, let it remain dormant. Let it stay there for a while. I got plenty of time. I got 20 years. I got 30. I got more. Right? But then something happens. And then something else happens. And then all of a sudden, where a person wasn't expecting it, now that hole got a little bit bigger. And that hole got a little bit bigger. And now it's much more difficult, but it's something you didn't have to worry about for a long time. So we have to be on constant guard. We have to, as you said correctly, we have to make fences and fences and fences around the Torah to make sure we don't transgress. To make sure there's no possible way the evil inclination is going to furrow its way. Because if the evil inclination has a way, you give it an inch, it'll take a mile. Mm-hmm. Right? And that we 100% we have to be careful from.
Wow. Well, Rabbi, we're at our time. We didn't get past 2:05 today.
No, we did. That's the end. I hit the end.
Wow.
Unless anyone's going to have questions on what we just said, that pretty much, ends.
You got a lot of good chat in the YouTube chat room. It's always nice to see. We had a good group on the Noahide World Center Facebook channel as well. It's always a joy, and I've picked up so much from you from this Mishnah. Going on at 11 episodes. It's needed. And it's even something I could review. So I want to encourage everybody to share this out there on social media. You've obviously thought about this long and hard, not just studied it and learned it yourself. You've prepared to share with us. And that's just, it's a true joy. And I hope it really helps others. It is helping me.
At the end of the day, all these things, it's not about theory.
Right.
It's about putting them step by step into action, even if they're baby steps. Right. And this is something, again, right 5 things, 10 things that a person's thankful for, and go through it once, twice, a few times a day, your outlook in the world will change. It has to change because you realize there's a bigger scheme of things going on and how much we have to be thankful for instead of just being, so pessimistic, and depressed and all these things. That may all be true.
Negative.
But if I see the world in the way I should,
boat anchor,
then it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, nobody wants to be a boat anchor. We're here to make the world a better place, and we appreciate the light of Torah shining on the nation of Israel. And nothing tops ethics as far as I am concerned, as far as applicable for Noahides. The Torah is the Torah is the Torah. You need a rabbi's guidance for such. But when it comes to things that you have to live in your skin and function in this world, you can't go wrong with ethics. And I'm so thankful you're taking the time to share this with us. So next week, Hashem willing, are we going on to 2-6?
Then you don't have to listen. But ethics are good. It puts us in a proper perspective.
Right. All right. So Hashem willing, are we on for next week, Rabbi?
We are
Nothing
on
stopping?
next
Hashem
week,
willing?
same time.
All right. So we're going to sign out for now, folks. Thank you all for being here. And it's always a joy to be with Rabbi Chaim Coffman live in Israel.